You're listening to El Cuarto de mi Suegra, where we gather as friends to discuss our daily lives y chismear un rato about our favorite artist, amigo. So welcome back to, otra vez, El Cuarto de mi Suegra. I'm your host, AK, and I am so happy. You guys don't even know. You guys don't even know. I'm going to do one of these because I am so happy that I am joined by my new friend, mi new amigo. He is actually, we've been chit-chatting behind the scenes and we're going to get into it, but he's actually from my hometown and we have so much in common. And I am super excited to introduce you to my new amigo, Victor. Say hello, Victor.
Hello, hello.
Amigo, thank you so much for stopping by to my little podcast.
De nada.
I'm like, it's so crazy. I am so thankful for you, for the support, for the follow, for reaching out, because
Uh-huh.
I feel like I don't even know. I feel like I'm a very friendly, and I'm always telling people, DM me, message me, tell me your topics, your ideas, and nobody like. Well, I shouldn't say nobody. People do, but it's more like people that know me. Like
Mm.
maybe we're not like super best friends, but like they will be like, oh, like why don't you say talk about this, But just like I don't know what it is. Like, I don't know if people are shy. I don't know. Like, what do you think? What do you
Could
think?
be.
People are shy?
It could be. I could
It
see
could
how
be.
that could be a factor.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
I can
before
also go
uh-huh.
ahead.
I was gonna say before I reached out, I was back and forth about it for like a week or so. I was like, should I not? And then some days I'd forget about it. And then one day I was like, hey, like, what's up?
Well, I am so happy that you reached out. And also, I just want to point out that you're so respectful and very nice on how you just reached out because I
Mhm.
feel like like anything in social media, people can be rude or people can just
Right,
be like too forward or too like I don't know, it can
right.
give you like weird vibes,
I get
and we
it.
were
Yeah.
talking about weird vibes.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate you reaching out first and then two for being so nice and so kind with your words and I
Mhm.
appreciate you liking the content and I welcome you to my amigos club.
I appreciate it.
But Victor and I were talking before we started recording about we're from the 805, both of us, right?
Let's go,
Kind of.
County. Let's go.
Yes. So San Luis Obispo County, and I was like shocked, even though that you are much younger than me. I'm like, I'm a señora for real, for real. But but we have actually some people that we know that we know mutually because growing in a small town, you know everybody pretty much, right?
Basically.
Basically. So so yeah, it's small town. Everybody knows each other, or like at least you know your generation for sure.
Yeah.
I bet you like you're gonna know so many people that I know. Cause I mean, I am much older, but I do have like my friends' siblings that are like, younger
Hmm.
or stuff like that. But we don't need to get into that. But we also have something else in common because I was telling Victor that I was actually born and raised into 11 in Tijuana, Baja California, Mexico. And Victor, where are you from?
So I was born in Ciudad Juarez, Chihuahua, Mexico, right across the border from El Paso, Texas. So I grew up between both sides of the border as a little kid. Back before, I didn't know into the like introspectively as I do now, but it was easier to cross the border before like the whole 9/11 situation happened.
Yeah.
So, my mom says the first time she took me to El Paso was when I was like three or so. So that would have been like 99 around there. And yeah, I grew up between both cities and I had an older cousin that lived in El Paso. That's who we would go visit in El Paso, was an aunt of mine, an older sister of my mom. And my cousins did speak English and they teach me a few words here and there. but since Spanish is still the common language, that's still what I would be speaking for the most time until we moved to California when I was 6 years old, and that's where like a fuerzas, I had to learn the language.
Yeah, and that's one of the many things we have in common. We both grew up in a border, which is different. I feel it's so
Yeah,
different, right?
I
Growing up,
agree.
people don't understand. From if you're from a town that has, border town,
Hmm.
from just like a ciudad in Mexico, I think there's a huge difference. Um, and people don't understand that. Like I feel like we were exposed to, first of all, to a lot of culture,
Hmm.
multicultural, like everybody pasa por allí. You know what I mean? Any different type of country, ethnicity, whatever, you go through the border. So you expose yourself to that. So I feel like in terms of cultural shock, we do well because of that. But it's still for me. I mean, you came here, you were technically a baby, you were a toddler, but I was 11 when I actually moved to California. And for me was, and the thing that good, the other thing that to remember is that I did not just move like across the border. I moved to like kind of
Deeper
deep
in.
inside in a
Yeah,
very small town, and it was a majority a white town, like,
yeah,
white people. So it was cultural shock for sure because being in the border, you see so many different types of people, but it's not just like white. So when I
yeah. I
went
get what you're
to
saying.
like, you know what I mean? Like when I went
Mhm.
to straight, like we were only five Mexicans in my grade. Like I was just like, and literally like two black people in our class. That was
Hmm.
to me, was shocking, which is like you will think like, well, you grew up in a border, you saw white people all the time. Well, no, no, it doesn't work that way.
I get
And
what you're
then
saying. Yeah.
and it's just so many different things. I mean, I grew up, with a lot of tradition from Mexico, the culture, the just all the morals and stuff, but very also like very family orientated, even though there's a lot of toxic things that happens with your family too, very controlling.
About that.
Right? So, which I mean, some people, to me, I wouldn't change how I grew up because I feel a lot of the things, the
Yeah,
way
no,
that I
me
grew,
neither.
right? Because
Yeah,
of how I grew up, I've been able to survive pretty
right.
much. So I am really appreciative of that. But getting into that, I was telling Victor that when I came here, I was technically illegally, right? In the sense of I did have a passport and I did have what they call a student visa, but then expires. You know what I mean? And then you just never went back. So technically that was kind of like the process back then when people would
Yeah.
come. They would not necessarily come how you see a lot of like migrants coming, which is very
Yeah,
sad
that's
and is
how my
very
dad has
heartbreaking.
explained it to me. Oh, sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt.
No, no, no. Go ahead. Go
Oh,
ahead.
okay. So, yeah, so that's how my mom and dad have explained it, like how we came to this country. So what helped for us was that my mom already had two older brothers living in California, so we ended up living with one of them first in Visalia, and then to Paso Robles with another uncle, and then we just stayed here. But yeah, it's not like a measuring contest, or but there are people that have had it worse, and fortunately for us, we don't have to like deal with coyotes or traffickers or jump through the fence or swim across the river. We came here legally on a visa. We just overstayed it. It expired in like, I want to say like May, June 2011, and we just clearly never went back.
Yeah, and that's so important you say that because even though our experience might not have been like traumatic,
Mhm.
to an extent, but I can only it was so hard for me. It was so hard for me to get adjusted to this country, even though again I grew up in a border, and I always saw the US with like wonder. Like I will always want to be like, what's across that? Like why everybody wants to go over there? Like what is this so good about that? And then I come and then I was just like, oh, well, it's not that great. People are mean, or it's not that great. Like people just don't care about
Yeah,
anything. So I was just
right.
like, or like, damn, my mom has to work all day long versus when we were in Mexico, she only worked until 3 o'clock and she got out the same time as we did
Yeah,
and be home with us. So I was just like, I know I kind of don't like this life, but then I was young. So it's just
right.
like you do whatever you can. But I do see the bigger picture, obviously, of my parents making that decision of us like expanding our knowledge, learning different things, especially the language, because she knew that that was going to be so important for the future for us. Even
Mhm.
because my mom never wanted to stay here, she just wanted us to learn and then go
Felt
back.
that. Yeah, there was one
But
time because when we first got here to Paso Robles, I mean, we had a rough, like, these, like what I'm about to say, it's not stuff I usually say out openly. It's usually with like people I feel more comfortable or whatever. But I mean, when we first got to Paso, like we were homeless basically. And my dad was doing everything he could, with whatever was within his reach, not having like a solid, social security number and all that stuff that's required to have a decent job, until he finally stuck through in an Italian restaurant. He got most of his cooking experience at Bonatavola on 10th Street in Paso. That's where he started. And well, yeah, anyway, uh, yeah, it was really rough coming to Paso, but that's why I appreciate these conversations like we're having right now,
mhm.
because you get to see things from like a different perspective. Like for me, as to what you were saying about getting assimilated to like the new culture and stuff, for me, it wasn't too difficult. The only thing that was difficult for me was the language. Because again, I
Yeah.
knew a few words here and there, like my yes, pleases, no's, and thank yous, but like to keep a full lengthy conversation, I couldn't, you know? And then it took me, I want to say about a year and a half, 2 years or so, because I finished kindergarten in Mexico, and then I started the first half of first grade, started the second half of first grade in Visalia, and then I started second in Piper in Paso Robles. And then the difficult part there was that all the curriculum was in English, so I was like, man, like what do I do, But like in a way, it forced me to learn the language, so I'm thankful for that experience, even though it was difficult. And like my mom would tell people too, like as a little kid when I was trying to learn the language, like out of frustration, I would cry because I'm trying to communicate
Mhm.
myself, but I can't. And
Yes.
then towards the end of second grade, I felt a little more comfortable with my English. It wasn't as rough, but it wasn't perfect either. And then the thing I'm very thankful for is that in third grade, I started at Georgia Brown.
Oh my
And
gosh, those were my
yeah.
nephews. Well, used to go.
Yeah, I'm real thankful for that school because it's very helpful. I saw a recent article that they're going to close it down due to like seismic activity that's going on
Yeah.
or whatever. Yeah, that's real unfortunate, but yeah, that helped because of course, you have the dual immersion program, so it helped like preserve my Spanish and then keep or like learn the English language. That's another little detail as a kid that tripped me out because I'd see like kids that, they look similar to me. I can see they're Hispanic, and then I try to start a conversation with them, and then they don't speak or Spanish. I was like, oh damn, like it's not like it's a bad thing, Like I've never judged people for that. My best friend right now is a Mexican that doesn't speak Spanish. I don't knock him for it, but yeah, that's
Yeah.
one thing I put on myself as a little kid. Like, I don't want to lose my Spanish growing up.
No, I definitely didn't either. Even though I was older, I can feel sometimes like we say like me trabo, like when I'm trying to
Sí,
like
yo me trabo
translate,
también.
you know? Like when you're trying to translate something and like especially when you're helping like for example a client or something
Mhm.
and you're helping in Spanish and you want to translate, but I think it's more because they're like bigger words, like more like I guess
Right, I
like
get it. Yeah.
you know, proper terms that I like get stuck and I had to like really think about it. But I know it. It just takes me a little while. But I started noticing that. And one of the things I'm doing to practice too is record myself in Spanish
Hmm.
because I'm like,
Yeah, I
no,
saw
like,
that you're trying to record more stuff in Spanish.
I just don't mind my craziness, but yes, like I'm trying because I funny story, like since I can remember, I wanted to be like something in the news. Like I wanted to be a reporter. I wanted to be like, doing interviews, or I wanted to do like sports broadcasting, which when
Sports with AK.
yes, because it's so funny because I actually growing up, I grew up with my cousins, and there were my closest cousin is a boy, right? So he always wanted to play soccer and football and baseball and all these things. And I was down. I'm like, okay, whatever, like we will play. So I really, really, since I was young, I love sports. I think they're so much fun, And but I remember watching sports with him, and there was never women. It was all men. So I told him like one day I'm gonna be there and I'm gonna be talking about, whoever. And at the time, nobody, there was not a lot of women, like there was none, I don't think, at the time,
Yeah.
me growing up. And so I always had that in my head. But now there's just so many, which I'm happy about. But I'm just like, dang it. I could have been the first one. But it's okay. It's okay. We will get there one day. No, but something that I also like the trigger me, and I wanted to point this out when you said about, you came here when you were 3 years old, pretty much, right? Like around
Yeah, I'd cross back and forth Juarez and El Paso since I was 3, but I didn't move to California till I was 6.
until you were 6, yes.
Yeah.
And we want to get to the topic of a DACA, right? Because the DACA program has been so amazing for millions and millions of young, well, now adults. Well,
Yeah,
so sort of amazing, but there's
that's
a
what I
lot
was
of
gonna
things.
say. I'm like, yeah, debatable.
Uh, not
No,
yeah,
sí se
like not,
agradece la ayuda, ¿no? Pero, o sea,
pero it could
también
be
no,
better.
es lo que iba a decir.
Yeah. And the thing is like I guess in the sense of amazing was because in my experience, right, when I came, there was nothing.
Right.
So yes, I had a passport, yes, whatever, but it expired. And then
Mhm.
it was just like, it was, I remember like when, become a teenager and you wanted to like work
Yep.
and you had to
Yep.
work under the table, like people pay
Yep.
you cash, or you had to get like the I-10 to, your parents got you the I-10 because my mom wanted to claim us. And, because she was working already, she wanted to do her taxes because she's like, I don't want to, like, if any, like, eventually, if I ever fix papers, or get my papers, I want to show that I paid taxes and all this stuff, right?
Mhm.
So, but it was until this day, and I'm an American citizen now, thank God, gracias a Dios. But until this day, I'm petrified of anything, doing anything bad. Like, I literally would not, like, my friends are like, oh, just do a U-turn. I would not do the damn
Felt that.
U-turn because I do not want to
Yeah.
get in trouble. And that was such a, like, growing up with that always in the back of your mind, like being scared because you knew you were
Yep.
like if you were doing something bad, but you never, like, you didn't, I mean, you didn't say like, oh,
Yeah,
mom,
if I
take me
could,
to,
yeah, if I could
like,
chime in on that, yeah,
yeah,
I
yeah.
I never was gang affiliated, but I grew up around that stuff, and yeah, it was hard. But yeah, I got into trouble like in my teens and stuff, and I got arrested. And then my immigration lawyer, told me, if you get into any more stuff, it was just misdemeanors, but she's like, if you get into any more stuff, your status can get revoked. I was like, oh, it's like, Uncle Sam pretty much bullied me into growing up. That's how I put it sometimes. But yeah, I've stayed out of trouble since.
And the thing I think about that is that I feel like people, they don't know how it is
Yeah,
to be in a country that you get reminded that you don't belong. One,
yeah, it's hard.
two, two, you didn't ask to come here.
That too,
Uh,
but
you know what I mean? And three, yes, I get like our parents. bigger picture and dreams for us to have a better
Hmm.
life, but it's been so difficult growing
Hmm.
up like that. And like I said, I am very blessed that now I'm able to be here and have everything straightened up. But I remember like even like when I got pregnant, I
Hmm.
still didn't have my, nothing. And I
Yeah.
was just like, had to go to like um Medi-Cal, and they're
Mhm.
like interrogate you like if you're like doing, like it's just everything was like I didn't want to
Overwhelmed
get,
with questions. Yeah.
yeah, and I didn't want to like, and I was embarrassed, and then like I didn't want to ask for help because again, I didn't want like eventually if I ever fix my papers, I didn't want people to be like, "Oh, you were here taking advantage of the country and the like programs," and you know how people are so like,
Right.
and and then it's just been so difficult, and I can only imagine
Yeah.
for DACA, students or even adults now, and let's talk about the program a little bit. Like I said, when I came here, it was not available. It became up
Hmm.
officially, like they start taking applications
Hmm.
2012.
Around there.
Yes.
Yeah. I still
So,
remember my whole process.
yes. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
So it's a lot, but I'll try to work my way through it. So we had to like file all the paperwork, and then we had to have valid Mexican passports, and then the nearest consulate to us was Oxnard, and from Paso to
Right.
Oxnard it's pretty far.
Yeah.
So I remember I guess the Mexican consulate in Oxnard was aware of this situation with DACA unfolding, so they decided to set up un consulado móvil in Paso. So
Mm.
they set it up at the old rec center that used to be in Oak Park.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I remember it was like October 2012, and it was freezing. We woke up at like 4 or 5 in the morning to get in line because the line when we first got there it wasn't too bad. But then when we were leaving at like 10, 11 a.m., because we were there for like a good 5 hours or something. So by the time we left, yeah, the line was like down the street because of all the people that were trying to apply. And growing up, I never really told anyone about my status. That was more something I kept to myself. Now that DACA is like a thing, I'm more open and vocal about the situation. But I still remember like walking out of there and seeing like all the other people that I've known being in line. And I was like, what? Like I would have never expected.
Mm-hmm.
So it
Yeah.
shows you who's all in the program. And then I've looked up the stats online because they have a website more so of like which like nationalities are under the program. And of course it's Mexico and El Salvador in like the top two spaces. But there's people from all over the world like that use that program, and there's Israeli like refugees.
Mm-hmm.
I know the whole Israeli-Palestine conflict's pretty high right now, but there's people from Israel that don't want to be involved with that anymore, so they decided to leave for America, and their kids get put under the DACA program. So it's not just a Latino culture
Right.
or like a Latino issue. That's what I like to explain to people.
And that is so important that you pointed it out because it seems like it's just people think it's just like Mexicanos, but it's not. It's
Hmm.
any child that came here uh underage, and I think
Hmm.
you had to be here for a time frame too to qualify.
Like I think at that time you had to be here in the country like upwards of 10 years without leaving.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so and that's the thing too, like the people that are against this program, of course, they don't know nothing about it and they don't know
Right.
how it is and they don't know what it is.
That's the other thing I like to explain too. It's not just them, it's like it's Hispanic people that are US citizens that also don't know how the program works because they're not involved with it hands on.
Yeah, and then they're like, oh, they're giving all these people, all these immigrants opportunities, and they're taking our jobs, and they're taking
I wish.
yeah, right. They're
I
taking
wish.
our scholarships, and I'm like, do you even know how this
Yeah,
program
the
works? And you don't
struggle.
even know how they don't even get any financial aid,
Nope.
how they don't even get any jobs. Pretty much, they're like, you hear now stories about. I recently saw a post about a bunch of students that were graduating the university and they were crying and pleading because one, they can't get a job. People don't hire them even though they're under DACA. And then two, DACA expires every 2 years, according
Yeah, you have
to,
to not even that. It's more like a year and a half because with how backed up immigration is,
right, the renewals.
you have to renew it 5, 6 months in advance. So yeah, it's more like a year and a half actually. The way I explain it, like yeah, I'm thankful for the help and the opportunity it does provide. But I mean, it's still very difficult to work around.
And even that too, like when you mentioned about you growing up and you didn't, it's not something you like tell people that like, oh, I'm here illegally. Like it's you were ashamed
Yeah.
about it. And you did, like I said, like you were a
I
child.
wouldn't say I would like me. I wouldn't say I was ashamed about it. It's just something I just didn't bring up. I remember one of the first people I actually did bring it up with was, my current best friend I told you about earlier.
Mm,
And at first he thought I was joking as like, because knowing me and the people that know me know I goof around a lot, but it's like, nah, like I'm actually pretty serious about this.
yeah. And like, yeah, I guess, I mean, I felt, I think maybe I felt embarrassed because of what school I went to. Because it's not like I was gonna be telling
Yeah,
people, you know
I
what
could
I
see how
mean?
you'd have a tougher time in Templeton
Yeah,
and
I
Paso.
was just
Yeah,
like, and so I don't think I was ashamed. It was just more like, and like I was embarrassed for no reason because I should not be embarrassed. Like, you know
mm,
what I mean? And I talked about this how like I'm so proud to be from Tijuana, and a lot of people are like, "Oh, Tijuana, ew, like ew, da da da," and I'm just like, no, Tijuana is such a amazing city. Baja California, period, is amazing, beautiful. Again, we welcome so many people. We learned so many different cultures, and there's just so much we embrace so many people. And I just think that
yeah,
just
like,
because you hear the negative,
uh-huh.
which there's crime everywhere, and
Right,
yes,
yeah.
you know what I mean, like look here in America, like I think we're just getting a little worse.
When I get sent down to Stockton for my work, in and out. I'm not trying to tourist. I'm not trying to see what's around. Nope, in, out, done. Like, yeah.
Right, and
Yeah,
it's like I tell my husband all the time, like literally there's parts of California that I'm like, oh no, like I am not gonna be here past
right.
5 p.m. And it's like, and Tijuana, I can be out and about because it's like
Mhm.
that's, I mean, I guess that's my home, that's where I'm from, and I know the
Right,
areas, I know where to go and not to go, I know who to hang out with and not to hang out with, like it's common
right.
sense. And then I usually go with family anyway, so it doesn't like, but no, like I think it's just the DACA program has brought opportunities to those who never even had an opportunity or a voice. Or
Ye-
I feel like, excuse me, part of also being not from here, you also always feel a little like unseen, or like you don't have the right to speak up your mind, or you
Yep.
don't have a
Yep.
voice.
Like a lot of people here in the States, and I get it with how frustrating the political scene has been lately, but when people say like, "Oh, I don't vote because like my vote doesn't count," and I'm over here like, I wish I could vote, you know?
Oh my gosh. You don't
Yeah.
need, like, I don't think you understand the
And
first time my,
that's sorry to interrupt, but yeah, that's another thing I feel like very strongly about too. Or like I'm pretty sure the Republicans or the conservatives don't want to pass like a immigration reform because that would the way I would see it at least, because there's always going to be those few Latino Republicans, right? But that'd be like 11 million new voters that wouldn't be receiving their votes, if that makes sense.
yeah. And then,
Yeah.
and again, like to clarify too, is because I do have friends and family members, they are Republican, okay?
Mhm.
And we try not to talk politics because
Right.
we can agree to disagree, right? So we're not going to really get at anywhere. But I do want to say that the people that I know that they are Republicans, they have their opinions, but I don't think they're as bad as what we see like with like Congress. Like those Republicans are just evil. Like they're just weird.
Yeah,
Like
that's a fine line. I always try to like balance myself too with like the line of work I'm in too, like meeting homeowners and such. Like, I show up to a house and like there's a Trump 2024 flag and you actually
uh
like I mean, again, to each their
right,
own, but
to each
right.
their
And
own.
then once I get to know these people, like because I can be at these inspections for like an hour and a half, 2 hours sometimes, so I start making small talk and you actually get to see the different side of these people, and it's not what some people would expect. So, long story short, there's good and bad people anywhere.
Yeah, and I think it's like again, part of the beauty of this country was that, because I'm gonna say was, because I feel like now it doesn't feel that way. It was like the freedom of have your own thoughts and opinions,
Hmm.
and like they say, choose your own religion, your own culture, your own political party, your own. And now, when you don't choose your culture, but you know what I mean. Like I'm saying, like there was just like so much freedom, right? Supposedly that's what we preach, and that's what we're like, yes, America, and it just doesn't seem that way anymore, and it like makes me very sad. It makes me sad that sometimes, and I recently recorded an episode about it, we have to call out our own people, because it's
Yeah,
like,
I was
how are
listening to one of your
you
podcasts the other day talking about that. Yeah.
it's like, how are you going to act like that, first of all? Like, two, like, why you're feeding into this misrepresentation that we already have. Like I don't understand. Like we want to be better. We want to break the cycle of
Right.
generations of stereotypes, of being negative, of
I
being
was,
against each other. And I
yeah,
don't understand.
just gonna chime in on that. I
Yeah.
was listening to one of your podcasts about like memes or content that's like more, they highlight more on like the negative aspects of the culture. Y pues a veces a uno no controla lo que le da risa, ¿no? Like I'll laugh at it too. And then
Yes.
like I start thinking about it more deeply. I'm like this really what we're highlighting right now?
Yeah, and I'm super guilty of it. Like I'm not even saying like I don't even watch those videos because it is funny. But in the sense too, also it's like, well, why is it funny? Because people are acting, they look like fools.
Mhm.
They look like people don't take him seriously. That's why you're funny. That's why you're laughing. So you have to think about, like, damn, like I have a friend that acts like that, or I have a family member that acts like that. Like, it's people just laughing and don't take them seriously. But yeah, they don't, because that's just some people's behavior are just off the walls. And it's like, and again, like I am so proud of being Mexicana, and I'm so proud of all the beautiful things our culture has, but we're also not
Mhm.
perfect. And I talk about that all the time.
Yeah, like me in the perspective of like as a male, like I grew up with all boys. I don't have sisters. I'm the oldest of three. Like my mom's the only girl in the house. But a veces sí nos tiene que castigar, ¿no? Or regañarnos, ya levántense a limpiar or whatever. But yeah, that's one thing that got ingrained into us, like to break the gender roles and not expect women to like do everything for us. Like I had an ex-girlfriend and when she'd come over, it's expected like the woman serves her man or whatever. I was like, I don't care. Like I'd serve her food and be like, here you go, split it, share, whatever, go from there. But that's one of the things that I would agree to. And my parents aren't like that. My parents are very kind people. Sometimes I get into it with them like any other person with their parents, but in Chihuahua in particular, it's a very conservative, very machista, place. And yeah, I look at stuff like that and I was like, nah, I'm not trying to be like that. I'm not perfect either, but I just
I think it's more
agreeing on
like,
what you're saying, yeah, is recognizing the flaws within our own culture and trying to work from there.
yeah, because it's like, like this is another thing too that we make fun of a lot, is our trauma. Que like la
Yeah.
chancla y que esto y que el otro, and we laugh about it because it's funny. Like there's a lot of videos of like like girls what is it? Reacting? No, not reacting.
Mhm.
Like redoing how their moms treated them to their moms, right? Like either doing
Yeah.
their hair or how they would talk to them. And you laugh because it's funny, but then you're like, this is all like, do you, because that's funny how, like through meeting people and doing interviews, we all grew up with so much like negativity, trauma,
I
and
wouldn't
and
say
like
for me it was necessarily trauma. I feel like my mom and dad no nos castigaban o no nos daban nuestras nalgadas, if it wasn't called for. But like one thing I do like jokingly still call my mom out on is that like I'm the oldest. Y al más chiquito bien chiqueado. Like when it comes to food and stuff, you can tell which sibling spent just a little more time in Mexico because me being the least picky eater. And then my youngest brother, like if he didn't want to eat something, my mom would like make him algo separado, para que coma él. Yeah, and me and my middle sibling, my brother Pedro, it's my brother Pedro, he's the middle one, and then Tony's my youngest brother. So me and Pedro had to eat everything, o si no nos ahí mero. And then my youngest brother, no, aquí, mijo.
you know, I'm gonna be the advocate for the young sibling because I'm the youngest of three. And let me just tell you, I don't know if it's because the different generation, but I've been watching the TikToks of people making fun of the younger sibling being the dumbest one or being the spoiled one.
Oh no,
And
my youngest brother's very smart, pero eso sí
yeah,
lo tenían
that's
bien
what
chiqueado.
that's why I was like, damn, we're so smart. But actually, I am going to record a TikTok about fun facts about being a young sibling because we had to lie. We were forced to lie to cover our elderly siblings' mess. We were forced to be their
I could see
lookout. We were
that.
forced to be their lookout when they would sneak out. We were forced to go with them everywhere because they would take care of us and we didn't want to
Yeah,
go, but they were forced to go. And therefore you were getting trouble because your siblings will do bad stuff and you were there and your mom will get mad at you too and you didn't have an option. And then I'm
I
like,
get that.
and they're like, oh, she's spoiled. Let me tell you, I don't know if you call spoil when you will get all the handy,
Hand
como
me
dicen,
downs.
hand me downs that tus
Yeah,
siblings. How is that being spoiled? My sister will get new clothes, and then my mom
yeah.
will like pass it down.
No,
Like,
a mí, when my youngest brother started growing up and he started getting taller, ya me robaba los zapatos y las camisas. Like, bro, like, what are you doing wearing my stuff?
so I am a supporter of young siblings because we did a lot. And then
or keeping, oh, I was gonna say keeping the podcast PG still, but like, once I turned 21, 22, getting home from the bar, it's 2, 3 a.m., texting my little brother, like, hey, like, open the door.
exactly, exactly. Or like you will just cover up for them for everything. And also I want to point out, I'm over here venting about being the youngest sibling. I want to point out that you're forever are going to be reminded that they took care of you. And it's like, girl, I didn't ask you to
Yeah,
take care of me, okay?
I
So
get it.
I don't owe you my life. And
Like
then
with my
two,
youngest brother,
yeah,
we live in Shandon now. We've been living there for like 2 years, so it's kind of a commute, or it takes a while to get into town to and fro. And I remember I was getting a haircut, and I was going to go back to Shandon, and my brother was working, and my youngest one, Tony, and he texted me, "I'm hungry, and I didn't bring lunch. Buy me something." And I was already on my way to Shandon. I was like, "Oh, all right." Like, you almost, like, I get what you're saying, and no es tu deber, pero pues se me hace gacho, no? And then I was like, all right, I turned back and I took him some food to his work.
yeah. And also, fun fact, you're going to be like 50, 60, and you're always going to be the baby of the family, no matter what you do, no matter if, like,
Yeah.
so it's like, I don't know. And that's the other thing too, like a misconception I think about siblings is that they always say the oldest had it harder because the parent was learning how to parent and they made a lot of mistakes.
Yeah.
But also, I want to say also because of you siblings making a lot of mistakes, like acting out, being bad, the
Oh,
younger
yeah.
sibling
No.
didn't have it easy. They had it harder because your parents were Like they never believed you. You're like, oh, I'm gonna go here. No, you're not. I already know you're gonna be
Yeah.
sneaking out, or like, and I'm just like,
Totally get it. Yeah. To this day, like, I mean, I think, I've stayed out of trouble for like a good 10, 11 years now, but se da cuenta uno, there's like a little certain level of distrust. Con quién vas y a dónde vas, even though I'm 28 already. But like, I get it, because of how troublesome I was. And then chiming in right now with what you said, and then tying it into the whole DACA topic, it was hard being the oldest because again, you know, I'm the oldest one, so like I going through high school and stuff, I did want to go to college at some point and I'll touch in on that too, but like I didn't have any older siblings telling me about like the SATs or which scores to get or where to apply, where to sign up, scholarships, all that. And I'm not making excuses to it. Like I take accountability to the mistakes and recklessness that I did. But my siblings have it, a little easier because they have someone to like guide them through. Like, my brother Pedro saw the mistakes I made, so he decided not to do that. And things went better for him, and he was very responsible, still is. Went to UC Santa Cruz. Well, he went to Cuesta and then he went to UC Santa Cruz. He graduated about 2 years ago, has a accounting degree from UC Santa Cruz. So now he sets the stepping stones for Tony. And now Tony's about to finish Cuesta, and I think he's gonna apply to college in Monterey. But yeah, there's all that stuff. And then in the topic of like parents learning how to parent, I've thought about that too. It started dawning on me last year when I turned 27 because my dad has a 3 year age difference on my mom. He's 3 years older than my mom. And so, some background context, but my dad was 29 and my mom was 26 when we moved to California. So when I turned 27, like it started kind of hitting me like, I'm now older than my mom when we first moved to California. I had to start thinking about it, because she was 28 when she had Tony. So at 26, she only had me and Pedro. But still, like I sit down and think about it. It's kids raising kids, like not knowing the language, not having anything in their favor. And then you're trying to feed these kids, trying to keep a roof over their head. It's a lot. That's kind of sidetracking, but that's part of the reason, like, why tanto como me ha ido mal en el amor, I'm hesitant to have kids because that's very big shoes to fill. Because yeah, I've had my ups and downs with my dad, but mi papá nunca nos ha dejado con hambre o que nos falte ropa, none of that. It's a very
Mhm.
responsible, stern but fair dad. So yeah, those are big shoes to fill. So yeah, I get the pressure, they felt, and they were learning how to raise kids. So I get it. By the time they get to Tony, ya saben más o menos, And then with the topic of DACA, again, I take responsibility for the recklessness that I did, but come around 2012, that was like the start of my junior year in high school, August 2012. And then, a couple months earlier, like in January 2012, I still kind of more so remember the details. But yeah, I remember I was about to turn 16. And then I started telling my mom, like, I want to work, but I still want to be able to go to school. And I was telling her that I could be responsible about it, manage to get my homework done and still go to work.
Mhm.
And then, as multiple people under the same situation could tell you, that's where they start realizing what being undocumented is and such. Because, I mean, when I first got to Paso when I was like 7 years old or so, I knew I grew up in Mexico and I was a little different from the kids. They're we're all Hispanic, we're all Latino, but my mom my mom has explained it this way to us. It's not that she has favorites or whatever, but you do have to recognize, like, my youngest brother Tony, he was born in Templeton, so he is an American citizen. Me and Pedro aren't, and you do have to go about these situations different because they're different kids you're dealing with.
Right.
So yeah, the point being, like, I knew I was Mexican, but like it wasn't until this time of year where like I started seeing what that actually means and what it implies.
Right.
And yeah, I got frustrated, and like my mom has teased me about it before. I mean, but I was a teen, how was I to react? Because like, my reaction at that time was like, well, what was the point of even moving to this country? Or it's like, why did we come here in the first place?
Right.
Because not only does it affect the work, it affects the school. Like, so there was no point on trying in school. So I deliberately like wouldn't try in school anymore because like, okay, like, well, what even is the point of this? And then one of my best friend I was telling you about earlier, we'd always talk about like all the shenanigans and stuff that Paso High would do for senior week. And I was like, you know what, I'll at least graduate high school. So so I started getting more of my act together, like started trying a little more in school. And then come around my junior year, August, September 2012, that's when the whole topic of DACA starts rolling out, and my mom and dad are all over the place, like trying to figure out what forms and what papers do we need and who do we see about turning these things in. And I remember we submitted the papers like around October 2012, and didn't hear for a while, but I guess that's how long they take. And renewing the forms a few times now, that's usually what they take. So around March 2013, I got my social security number, employment authorization card, and just went from there. And that's another thing I do like to explain to people that don't know about DACA. It's that it only gives you the ability to work and have a social security number, but it doesn't let you vote or leave the country and such, for the people that don't understand. And it's very difficult because, yeah, after I graduated high school, I went to Quest, and that took me a while. It took me like 4 or 5 years because still I wasn't taking it seriously at first, and then I got through it. But even with DACA, that's why I said earlier at the beginning, it's debatable. And there's this one guy, Moore, I think is his name. He's on Instagram, and his story, if I'm not mistaken, he got a degree in aeronautics and he wanted to get into SpaceX, but to work with rockets or any of that material, it's considered working with weapons of mass destruction under the US
Yeah, I think I
government.
saw that.
Yeah, so you can't like even be a resident for that. Like you have to be a full like US citizen to be able to work in those programs. So the young man's talented, he's smart, he got through his school, but because of his immigration status, he can't get into SpaceX. So I think he does like computer science or something, but still, it still limits the opportunities. In my case, that's something similar. I wanted to get into law enforcement, despite me. It's kind of ironic for how troublesome I was as a kid, but I wanted to get into law enforcement. And, that's one of those things where even under DACA, you can't get in. You have to be a resident pending to be a
Yeah.
US citizen, or you have to be a US citizen. Earlier last year, California passed a law to let people under the DACA program apply for law enforcement. So I was back and forth about it. I'm not, again, I'll take responsibility, but after I separated from my ex, I put on weight. That's the first time I reached 200 pounds. And I'm a pretty slim guy for the most part. I weighed like 170, 180. So I put on some weight. And I used to box too. When I was boxing for my first match, I actually weighed in at 139. So that puts into perspective the weight I put on. So I was like, man, I don't know. Like I put on weight. I'm so out of shape. Could I even do this? So I made the attempt. I applied with Slow PD actually, and I was training for it. I Just to give some more background context, I was working at Echo, the homeless shelter in Paso. That's I'd say
Yeah.
that's probably like the nicest, decent job I had like before I have what I have now. And my shift was from 3:30 p.m. to midnight. So I'd get out of the shelter and I'd go to Planet Fitness at like 1 a.m. I'd be training, working hard, trying to get on what was it? Like March 2023, I went in for the physical exam and I passed it. Actually, I was surprised. But then the next day, that's where I bombed it. So I bombed the interview phase, and it did bum me out for like 3 days. I won't lie, because this is something I've been wanting to do for like the longest, and the opportunity came and I fell short, so it did bum me out. But you know, I was like, I've been through worse. All right, so what can I do now? So I kept my cool, and then I went down the path that I'm in now, which is doing home inspections for insurance companies. It's a third
Right.
party inspection service company. And my brother was the one that told me about it, Pedro, because one of the guys he was rooming with in Santa Cruz told him about this job. And Pedro had actually told me about this job like before I tried to apply with Slow PD. But I was like, nah, like I want to, this is my own personal goal. I want to make it. And when things didn't work out, I was like, all right, I'll take you up on it. And I started the process for this job. And then, I wouldn't say I'm balling, but I make a decent like living now where like I'm finally financially stable for the first time in my 20s, which is a big like plus for me.
Right. That's amazing.
That's things are starting to look up for me like for the first time since I graduated high school. The certification I was telling you about, I've been aware that I had to get it because with the company I'm working with right now, they give us 6 months to get the certification, but I was always just busy, so I didn't get the time for it, and then I got around to it, and then that certification really makes a difference between having a 9 to 5 and a career. So yeah, I was really happy when I got that done finally because they give you two attempts to pass it. I didn't pass it the first time, and then I got it the second time. And then when things were getting hard, like all these past 10 years, I was like, man, like I always hope something comes up before my 10-year like anniversary of graduating high school, which is coming up pretty soon in June 2024 this year. So pretty content with life at the moment, kind of rambling right now, but
No,
yeah, that's
that's
some background. Yeah, no, that's some background context as to what I've had to deal with being the oldest of an all boy household of an immigrant family. I'd like to think, of course, we'll never know that if DACA had rolled out maybe like a year or two sooner, the whole trajectory of my life would have taken a completely different path. But
mm,
things have worked out the way that they have now. Sidetracked into that. I got into boxing like 3 weeks before I graduated high school. And, there's friends and stuff that I met through the sport that, I wouldn't have met had I gone straight to a 4 year after high school. So sometimes I think of that perspective too, things happen for a reason. Yeah.
no, and I appreciate you sharing your story and kind of the struggles because it is a lot of like challenges you been through again from being, like you said, undocumented, and then also like being in the DACA program, how difficult it is. It's not an easy, uh, you don't have it easy at all. It is a little helpful, like you said, you get to have a social and then have that work. But in
Mhm.
my eyes, I'm like, okay, well, yes, they make you like have a social to work so that you can pay the taxes. But it's not like it doesn't do
Yeah,
anything
that's
for
one of
you
the things I,
besides
I wanted
that.
to chime into. Yeah.
And it's like,
You know,
and I think it's important for people to hear stories. And I just wanted to say really quick is that I know you keep bringing up that you probably were not, what do you say, you got yourself in trouble in a point in your life as a teen.
yeah.
But I just want to I just want to say that, that's, I don't, I mean, I don't feel like you should feel guilty about it because first of all, you have to think about like you were not just a teen boy. You had to go through all these hoops and loops, and being uncertain of your future, and that is so frustrating. See, un regular teenager, their hormones, the stress levels, like they think everything is difficult, and they have everything easy for them. Imagine somebody that is going through a hardship, like,
No,
challenges.
neta, hasta me dan ganas de llorar. Like, thank you for, understanding and seeing that, because not a lot of people would, and I would give myself a hard time through the years over that. And I think around the past 2 years or so, I finally came to terms with myself with that. Like, como dices tú,
Like a lot of guilt for
sí, sí,
things
de
that you
así,
did.
yeah, yeah, sí, de así uno de morro está de loco y luego, pues, con todas las circunstancias que se le sube a uno.
Yeah, and and it's like like I said, like, and I had learned that too because I became a young mom and a young wife, and people think that it's like, oh, porque pues está, and like she just was like de la vida loca, or she was on the streets, or she was like,
Mhm.
like she was not educated, that's why, and she's like she was
No,
an
I get that
immigrant.
too. Like, when it comes to stuff like that, yo siendo hombre, pues, like, I'll never realistically understand stuff like that. There was a time, like, earlier when I was younger, like, I would be that type of person. Like, like you brought that upon yourself, just out
Yeah.
of ignorance. But, I have primas, pues, like I said, I don't have sisters, pero tengo primas que son mamás solteras, y veo lo que pasan, pues, and I'm like, all right, like, it's not that simple.
No, and I've been very blessed, like in the sense of choosing right. My husband had always stepped up, and he also comes from a very family orientated background, and that I think has helped us both because we're all about family, and but we're all about family but breaking the toxic cycle of families. We're like,
Yeah.
like we're trying our best to, and that's also a challenge itself. Like I said, when I met him, I did not have my
Mhm.
documents. So, and he didn't know
Mhm.
that. Like, it was not something I'd be like, oh, hey.
Yeah, on that topic. On that topic too of dating and being undocumented and such. No es
It's
que
not
uno
something you
ande
say
de
the first
lángaro,
date.
de interesado, no, but, like, right, that too. But it's like, if I'm being completely honest, like, if I start to get to know a girl and she doesn't have papers, I'm probably not going to side with that, because realistically, if I'm looking for a long term commitment, I would want someone that could help me with that. And, I don't know if you could relate, or something similar when you were saying that you were pregnant with your child and you don't have papers. Me as a man, I'm not the one that's bearing and holding the child, but I do think of it in the perspective that no más de interés, pero I would want to be with it, that something does happen, I get deported for XYZ reason. I'd rather avoid that so I can be present in my child's life, if that makes sense.
I totally agree with you. And I don't think that it's nothing wrong with you thinking that way. I my
Yeah,
people think it's
because
like, people might think
yeah,
like, oh, but he doesn't have papers, so why does it matter? No, like,
right.
I think based on my experience, because I did become that young parent, that young mom, and I did not had, you know, that the legally the papers. Um, it was very difficult. The process was difficult. Thankfully, thank God, I was able to
Yeah,
fix everything pretty quickly. Like once we got married,
right.
and but if I would not have papers and he would not have had papers, I cannot even imagine how hard.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's people that been in that situation, and I'm sure there's marriages of like
Yeah,
both of
there's
them.
one of my friends recently that got married, and she's undocumented too, and she got married with someone that doesn't have papers too. But I mean, it works for them, to each
Yeah,
their
and
own. But it's like, you
right.
got to deal with all these different circumstances, because that's her first marriage. She already has a child. I'm not trying to put this person's business out there, but she already has a child from, like, someone else, so her husband doesn't, or isn't in, like, the situation that I just explained, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
So I
and I
mean, it
think
works for them, but again, everyone has their own different situation.
no, and you have the right to have, besides that, you have the right to be like, okay, this is what I'm looking for, the like the qualities or whatever. Like that you have the right to do because you've been through the struggle. You know how hard it is. Like why would you want to also bring somebody into your
Yeah,
lives to struggle with you and then add
yeah,
children to that? It's
yeah,
very difficult.
yeah. Like I was gonna say again, in a hypothetical, like say I were to be with a person and we had a child, but I don't have papers or whatever. I even if things hit the fan or whatever, like in a divorce or whatever, I'd still would want to be in this country paying child support than being deported, you know?
Yeah, no, it's a valid
Because
point.
with
I think
one of mis primas in El Paso, her ex-husband, they separated or whatever, and he's from Juarez too, and she fixed him papers. My cousin was born in California, and well, yeah, she's U.S. citizen, so she fixed him papers, and then they divorced or whatever. But he's a citizen now, so they're not together. But at least he doesn't have the worry of being deported and not being active in my little nephew's lives. So
yeah,
that's
no.
why I look at it that way.
No, and it's very smart. It's very smart, and I'm glad that you brought that point because I think that um as humans in general, we go with just our emotions and of course, if you love somebody, you love them and it is a difficult situation.
On that topic too of romance and all that, like it has to be with the right person too, because in my adult years, the only serious relationship I've had was with my now ex-girlfriend. We've been separated for like 2 years now, but yeah, with her, she's Mexican too, born here in San Luis, and I did like her for her, and I generally did want to get married for her and not the papers. Of course, that's a plus, but it wasn't
Right.
solely because of that. But I had my mistakes too in the relationship. I won't lie. I definitely wasn't unfaithful. I'll putting that out there. But she got too toxic, too possessive, and like it started affecting my mental health and how I'd come home and like my mom would see the differences in my mood and stuff. And she had no influence in that. That was my decision to make, but I had to cut her out and I'd start noticing differences. It was hard because I genuinely did love her, but I knew I made the right decision when the days after I'd go to work like más tranquilo, más calmado, with like my headspace not as cluttered. And it was a hard decision to make, but I had to make it. And then I know again it's not a measuring contest, but I know people that have had it worse, like they've had to deal with like abuse and such, like physical or verbal, with
Right.
the hope that they might get papers. And sometimes they do, y peor, a veces no. And, I'd rather just not deal with that. The thing I'm working towards right now that I've been working for the past few months is advanced parole. It's an option that they
Oh
give us
yeah.
on DACA, yeah, to leave the country under, a viable merit. So the
And then
thing
you
I'm
get
trying to
like
get is
your
brace.
passport stamp, right?
Yes.
You get your passport stamp and then when
So
you
the
come
thing
back, you're coming back legally.
Yes.
Yes.
So the thing I'm trying to get is braces done in TJ, because that's the closest Mexican border town, whatever, to us here in California. And then
Hmm.
I would like to jump in a plane and go over to Juaritos and see my family that I haven't seen there. Because I still have family on my dad's side, like primas and primos that I'll still talk to every once in a while on Facebook. And there's a it's it gets a little dark, not inappropriately dark, but like emotionally. I had an older cousin that uh he passed away about 10 years ago, and he had a little girl that he had, but she was born in Mexico, so she doesn't have US citizenship, so she stayed in Juarez with her biological mom. Uh and yeah, that's been pretty rough because Well, yeah, I mean, I'd like to see her in person someday, you know? Like, I'll still talk to her on Facebook, like through message or whatever,
Yeah.
but it's not the same as in person. Y también con mi abuelito. My last living grandparent is my paternal grandfather, my dad's dad.
Yeah.
Y no es que me da envidia, pero like mis primos que sí pueden cruzar para allá, and when they take
They don't go
pictures and
see
stuff
them.
with him, no,
Oh,
they do go see him, but it's
oh,
like
that's nice.
me pongo a pensar like me gustaría estar ahí con él, you know, because they say they took me to meet him when I was a baby, but clearly I don't remember. Me gustaría con que sea conocerlo, and you know, it's rough. I That's one situation. I've had a cousin pass away, una tía, y luego mi abuelita. Oh, I'll get into my grandma a little bit because that's a very important character in my life. But yeah, it's three people in my family that have passed away that I didn't get to see because of this border situation, and that's
Yeah,
another thing.
that's
Some
something that
people
you
don't get to
struggle.
see. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's tough. It's very tough not being
So
able to be
yeah.
there.
So you know, Juarez always has this bad rep, and it's
Oh
not
yeah.
the most touristy place. And if I'm being realistic, like when people ask me, "Oh, what's there to see from where you're from?" Don't go. Like if you realistically, you know, of course, media always makes things seem worse than they actually are. But when it comes to Juarez, like, you know, just don't go if you don't have anything important to do there.
Right.
But point being, leaving the violence, and you know, of course, my parents wanting a better life for me and my brothers is part of why we came to California. But if I may say so, the breaking catalyst was the schooling situation I had. So I finished kindergarten in Juarez, and the kindergarten and the elementary school in Juarez separated or worked as two separate entities. So we literally lived across from both the kindergarten and the elementary school. So I finished kinder, and then I don't know if it was like something with the way the education in the state of Chihuahua works. In order to enroll or attend, you had to have a an older sibling currently attending.
Oh,
Me, of course, being the oldest, and Pedro was only like 2 years old at the moment. I couldn't enroll, so my parents had to pretty much put me to live with my grandma. And you know,
okay.
Juarez is a very big place, and my parents didn't have a car at the time. So, you know, just with bus routes alone, it took like 2 hours to get from where we lived to my grandma's house. So, you know, it wasn't like a thing where my mom and dad could pop in the afternoons after work to see me. You know, it was more like once a couple of weeks or once a month they'd see me.
Hmm.
So my grandma raised me for a while for a good 6, 7 months. And, you know, my just to give you some background context of what the living situation was, you know, of course, not a measuring contest. I know there's people that have had it worse. But in my parents' house, you know, they had running water, electricity, the best basic amenities, you know. But my
Hmm.
grandma's house was this cement shack up in the mountains, like, you know, it, para la gente que no sabe o no conoce cómo sirve todo eso, la gente se tiene que subir a los postes de la electricidad a robarse la luz y todo eso. Yo de niño todavía me acuerdo, like, people going to this thing que le decían el pozo, el hoyo, something like that. It's like a body of water.
Uh-huh.
And again, my grandma's house was at the top of this mountain, and I still remember people to this day, like, con las dos cubetas de agua, and like with the stick in the back of their
Yeah.
shoulders, like carrying water up the mountain. So yeah, I got to see all that stuff like that, and even at my grandma's house, mi abuelita no me dejó con hambre o con mi ropa sucia, none of that. She took very good care of me. But it's stuff like that, you know, 22 years being in the States where I'm still thankful for the most basic of stuff like a roof over my head, clean
Yeah.
drinking water, and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, and I think that having those experiences and like living like in Mexico even for a little bit, it gives you a perspective. Like and that's why I always say I'm thankful that I grew up into like the age of 11, because the same thing, like we grew up not even like in a avenue or in a street. It's a callejón. And I don't think people understand. It's like there was like it was dirt. It's dirt and it's like kind
Yeah,
of like
yeah,
you
yeah.
go down you go down the mountain, it's like a hole.
Yeah,
It's
my
like
parents' house, they had pavement on the roads and stuff, but at my grandma's neighborhood,
right.
yeah, it
It's
was a dirt road that you go up.
yeah, and that's how we grew up. And it was like muddy when it rained, and my house was just like wood. Like it was never like material, but then finally,
Hasta la fecha sé lo que es bañarme a cubetazos.
yes, the water runs out. You have to shower just with cold water and
Yeah.
all those experiences. I think that's why I've been able to appreciate like little things and the big things. And I'm very thankful and grateful for the life that I have. And there's something that you do that I do all the time, that you've been doing a lot and been saying a lot. We know the other people had it worse.
Yeah.
We always say
It's
that.
because I try to be considerate of that because
Yes.
like
But you have to think,
mi papá siendo señor de rancho because my mom's the one from Chihuahua. She was born in Camargo, and then my grandma took her and mis tíos to live in Juarez. My dad's from Zacatecas, from Sombrerete, Fresnillo area. So there's some little ranchito out in the outskirts of that area, but yeah, still, mi papá siendo señor de rancho, no, es que yo no tenía zapatos, o yo así
right.
andaba piscando frijol and stuff, and it's hard to hear, but it's like, I mean, he's right.
Yeah, and I'm not saying like like we didn't like of course other you hear the stories from your
Yeah.
grandparents or your parents and it was hard, but I think that what I have learned through therapy is that I need to start validating also that experiences
Oh
that I
yeah.
had, right? Like we had it hard, maybe
Yeah.
not with like clothes and like food, but
Hmm.
it could have been like mentally and
Right.
also challenging like life challenges. So I
Hmm.
think it's important, but I do that all the time. I'm like, I know,
Yeah.
pero no me voy a quejar porque toda la gente lo tiene peor. But I'm like
Right.
struggling emotionally, I'm
Right.
struggling financially. And it's like, no, but I am struggling too. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
And en lo que dices, pues, like, validating and accepting is part of the healing process of
yes,
what you have been through.
yes,
Y no nomás eso, but like, I mean, I kind of would bring it up with with my youngest brother growing up. It's like, man, you don't know what's up, but like, I've matured now and gotten out of that. Uh, I have cousins on my dad's side that, live in Paso too, and I'm pretty close with them. I'd even consider them like siblings too. And with my youngest cousin, Yuvia, I have a 13 age year difference on her.
mm,
And she was born in Templeton too in '09. And, you know, when it comes to the little ones, like my brother Tony or my other cousin Brisa or Yuvia, they didn't really get to see the struggle like that. I mean, like they did, but they didn't.
yeah,
Whereas to
it's
like yeah, as to like where me, Pedro, and my other cousin Hernan, like we saw more of the struggle. But that's another thing too, like with the little ones, I'm not, now that I've grown up and matured, of course, I'm not like, oh, like you guys don't know what's up, like you guys wouldn't have lasted here, you guys don't know this. Like, nah, that's not something you bring up with your kids. Of course, I don't have kids of my own, but I feel like that's not something that's appropriate to bring up with children, if that makes sense.
yeah,
Like rubbing stuff like that in their face, because
right.
one, it's not circumstances they're having to deal with anymore.
It's
Y
a
de
new,
hecho,
new, new
y
time.
de hecho uno debería estar contento que no les esté pasando cosas así.
It's true. It's very
Yeah.
true. But amigo Victor, I think we can talk and talk because it's so
Oh,
funny.
I
We have
can too. I can too.
yeah. And we've been talking even before we recorded. So
Right.
but I think that your story, the your the just in general the feedback and the
Mhm.
information you provided, there's going to be so many people that can relate to. I relate to your story, even though that again, like I am not in the DACA program or anything, but I think it's more than just talking about that. It's like our sharing our stories of being from a
Yeah,
different country.
that's part of the reason I wanted to jump on here too, see if there is other people that relate or not. Because on the topic I had mentioned earlier about like feeling frustrated once I realized what being undocumented all
Yeah.
entailed, like at that time, before like social media really took off like that and stuff, I'd used to think to myself, like, am I the only one that's going through these things? And with the age of the
Yeah.
internet now, and seeing like people that I follow and such, I've gotten to see that I'm not the only one. That there are other
Yeah.
people that have had similar stories. That show there's people that have gone back to Mexico on their own terms, or fell down like a deep rabbit hole with like substance abuse and such, because pues en el momento se desesperaron y cayeron ahí.
Yeah. And like I said, it could be very challenging, mentally challenging, physically challenging. People sometimes there's just like, this is just not the life one I asked for, I hope for. So I think it's important that we share our stories, especially like you said, if people is gonna, even though that is kind of sad that people like can relate to you and they're struggling like you or feeling like you,
Mhm.
because you don't want people to feel that, but at
Right,
least it makes you feel better because you're not alone. And
right.
I think that that's so important. But amigo Victor, thank you so much for joining me today.
No
And thank
problem.
you for talking to me. And thank you
Thank you
for
for
the
your time.
support. I
Of
definitely, it means so much to me that you support me and that you're rooting for me. And
course.
it even means more because we're from the same town, kind of. So I appreciate you. We will be in touch.
Of course.
And thank you so much to all the listeners who are listening to this episode. Again, also for the support. Please don't forget to follow all the social media platforms. I am trying my best to juggle all of them. So just bear with me. And until next time, Victor, you want to say bye?
Hasta luego.
Bye, guys.